Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the National Press Club. I'm not Barbara Cochran. I'm Rick Dunham, the president of the National Press Club Journalism Institute, which is the educational and charitable arm of the National Press Club. And just to give you the 30-second version of what we do, our job is to produce training sessions and programs on journalism skills that will keep people who are in the business in their jobs or help them find new jobs or help to hone the skills of people who are coming up in the business. And it looks like we have a wide variety of people from young reporters to mid-career here. This session is underwritten by a grant from the Scripps Howard Foundation. It's one of a series of programs that is designed to help improve the skills of mid-career journalists. But of course, this is one of those programs that could help journalists of all ages. With that, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Barbara Cochran, who will be moderating the discussion. Barbara also will be taking my place as president of the board of the National Press Club Journalism Institute come July, and I really appreciate everything that she has done and will do for the Journalism Institute. Barbara?
Thank you, Rick, and I'm so glad you could be here for this session and to get us off to a good start. And thanks to all of you for being here this evening. I presume you all have your business cards in hand, and you'll get a chance to meet everyone at the end of the session, and you'll also get a chance to ask some questions about midway through the hour we're going to spend here together. I also want to thank Mike Sarahan for his able work on this as the chair of the Press Club's Programs Committee. It was great to work with Mike on this, and he's here also in the back of the room. And also Julie Hsu, who is the executive director of the National Press Club Journalism Institute, who handled all of the logistical things, made sure we have water on the table, and has taken the RSVPs from so many of you who signed up to come. So thank you very much. It's obviously, from the size of the crowd, we can see this is a topic of great interest. And I can remember a time not all that many years ago when actually the idea of a print reporter wanting to be on television as an expert or a commentator was rather rare. There were some print reporters who thought that this was not something that they should be doing, and there was one news organization that I can think of, won't say any names, but the initials are NYT, that wouldn't allow its reporters to appear on something like a television Sunday interview show or anything like that. So things have definitely changed with the growth in media and the impact of digital media. Now I think it's much more something that people are thinking about. I've seen both sides of the equation. When I was the executive producer of Meet the Press, I had to think about which reporters to invite to be on the show, and selected them usually for their expertise in a given subject area or their familiarity with the guests that we had on. We had some really interesting people and a wide variety of people. But then a few years later, I became the president of a journalism organization, and I was now myself invited to be on television as an expert. And I have to say, it was a very scary proposition. I knew what the terrors were of trying to figure out what to say, and what I discovered was that afterwards, no matter your loved ones who had watched you were much more likely to comment about what you looked like than what you had to say. So now, with more outlets than ever, reporters are in high demand as guests on television. And how to get some of those coveted invitations, and why do some get invited back while others do not? Those are the questions we'll try to answer tonight. We have an all-star panel here to give us the inside scoop, and I'll introduce them briefly, and then we'll get right into the discussion. As I said, I'll ask questions for about a half an hour, and then you'll have your chance to ask questions. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. I'll begin with the lady in the middle, Lucy Spiegel from CNN. Lucy is Executive Director for Contributors and Audiences, and previously she was Executive Producer of CNN's Weekend Public Affairs programs, and before that, she and I were colleagues at CBS. Next to her is Alla Lora of Washington Week in Review. Before becoming producer of Gwen Ifill's Friday night program, Alla was producer for MSNBC and NBC, so she's had us a couple of network experiences under her belt. And then Amy Shuster, who is producer of MSNBC's Rachel Maddow show. Amy has been a producer at MSNBC for a number of years, working on news coverage and also Ed Schultz's The Ed Show, so we thank her for coming from New York to be with us tonight. And then finally, Jonathan Capehart. Jonathan is both an opinion writer for the Washington Post and a regular commentator for MSNBC. So he is someone who has successfully done what we hope to learn more about tonight. And for that reason, I'm going to start with Jonathan. We're sort of assuming that every reporter wants to be on television, but let's get an answer to that question. Why should a reporter, you've had a very successful career as an opinion writer. Others here have had successful careers as reporters for print publications. Why should a reporter who works mostly in print want to get on television?
Thank you very much, Barbara, and everyone for coming out. The simple answer to your question is visibility. I mean, as reporters, we're in this business because something interests us. We want people. We report the hell out of a story, and then we want people to read it. We want people to know more about it. And so, and especially in this age of multiple platforms where people are not just getting their news anymore from newspapers or magazines, they're getting them from all sorts of venues. To go on television is, I think, vitally important. It's one, visibility, it's two, getting readers. When you're on television, thanks to Twitter, folks know when you're on. You can tell people when you're on and they watch. You can send them a link to the piece that you've written. Hey, I was just on Rachel Maddow's show. Here's the piece that I wrote. You can learn more about it. As I said before, it gives you exposure to things that you care about. And then the other thing, and that's very important and why you should want to do television, people like to talk to people who are on television. I cannot tell you how helpful it is to be able to pick up the phone. And this isn't just now. This was when I was in New York and I was doing New York One every Friday, the Friday Reporters Roundtable. And I would pick up the phone and just, this is Jonathan Capehart from the Daily News. And folks would say, oh yeah, I see you on New York One. When before, the person probably wouldn't even pick up the phone. So that's why I think you should do television. But the other key thing, and then I'll end my little rambling response, you have to want to do television. You cannot be one of these folks who's a print person and you're standing from on high and thinking that the folks in television do something that's beneath you or beneath journalism. Because when you sit in front of that camera, you can try to hide your contempt for what you're doing. The television, the camera, it will always show up. So you have to want to do it. And I'm not going to steal any. I was peeking at your cards, so I'm not going to steal any of your thunder. But some of the information that you're going to get will be very, very helpful to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. So we'll segue right over to Lucy and say, so someone has decided, as Jonathan did, that they want to be on television. Now what? What are the do's and what are some of the don'ts?
The most important thing to remember is you have to get yourself noticed. Now, how does one go about that? First of all, I think you have to do your own homeschooling. You have to watch television. What is the person who may be on the same subject that you write about frequently? What are they doing that you don't do? And more importantly, what can you do that's better than what they are saying? So how do you do that? It's a social media world. You blog, you tweet. If you have a terrific article and the subject is in the news, you send it our way. The other thing to do is to be on panels around this town. I have had more of my young staff come to me and say, I saw reporter X from a newspaper and they were absolutely fabulous. You should give them a try. Let's face it, this is a town where you have to see and be seen, and you're already doing that because you're covering the news. When there are TV reporters in the room, keep an eye on what they do and how they handle themselves, and make friends. Pass those cards out, because you know where they all come? To me, especially if you want to be on television. So thoughtful topics, email and make sure that the number one don't is, if the stories in the news are terrorism or taxes or tornadoes, and you may be the foremost expert on the 401k that there is writing, please, this is not the moment to send me that, and this happens all the time. Smart people don't always think about what they're sending to you. Wait until your subject is in the news, or the 2 or 3 subjects that you are terrific on. That's the moment to strike. If we're talking about 401ks going to hell in a handbasket, and you do know about that, I want to hear from you, because there'll be show after show after show, especially on a 24-hour network, where we can, we sop up guests like sponges. And the one thing is, we always are looking at what the competition is doing naturally. So we want to see what we rob Peter, they rob Paul, and everybody gets on television. So most important thing, get noticed, get on those blogs, tweet, push what you have, push your best thing, okay? Do not blanket email. I know that there are some reporters who do this. Not a good idea. I don't want to see her name and my name and everybody else's name on the same thing. We all want to feel special, So if you got something to say, just send it to me, or something to say to her. Just sort of put us in a little trough and send it our way. I think that this is the way to get noticed if there's something that's a burning issue. And here's the other thing. If you're about to break news, for heaven's sake, let us know. This is the time you really want to get on the air, these incredible stories. I'm thinking about when The Atlantic broke the story on Bill Bennett's gambling. Remember that? Mm-hmm. He was all over the news. I mean, it was just out of nowhere. And it may be one of those stories that it's the break of a lifetime, and you've got it. That's the kind of thing to push forward. So then, shall we move on to what happens after you catch somebody's eye?
Well, let's hear a little more advice about how do you catch someone's eye. And Amy, Lucy talked about the 24-hour news cycle, so which you also know intimately.
Yes, I know that very well. And I think you brought up such great points about blogs and Twitter, and I just want to build on that a little bit. There are certain bloggers that we pay attention to every day. There are blogs I read every day. I want to know what Ezra Klein thinks about economics. I want to know what Greg Sargent has to say about the political scene. So I think that all producers are looking at these blogs. The blogs are really driving the conversation today. Things have changed so much. And we're also, to build on your idea about Twitter, there's so many opinion leaders out there that are tweeting stories. So look at your beat, what you're covering, and think about who are the people out there that are on television or that we're paying attention to that drive the national conversation, and how can your story advance that? I think that in your role as a reporter, you already have the toolkit. You know how to tell a story. You know what's news. So play upon that when you're talking to us. We, as you said, this 24/7 news cycle, it's this constant churn. We constantly want to know what's new. So when you're pitching to us, don't just regurgitate what the story is that we've been talking about. Tell me how you can advance the story. Do you have original reporting? Did you talk to a news source? Or are you an expert in your field? I know on the Maddow show, we're always looking for that expert voice. Rachel wants to talk to, this is the foremost person, this is the person who's been covering the story for years, who knows the players. That's who we want to talk to. So prove to me how you are the expert. The other thing is you have to think like a TV producer. Did I just say that? I feel like I might have, but because it's constantly what I'm obsessed with. So we're not just thinking, for a nightly show, we're not just thinking about what everyone has been talking about today. We're thinking about how is the story going to move forward? If it is day one of the story, for example, the Boston bombing, okay, what's most important to talk about today? If you've been, we had so many great Boston Globe reporters who are out there in the field who we might never have talked to before on the show, who we just, found that day. But then, okay, what's day two? How do you see that story evolving and how can you play into it? So I think that you really need to think about how we think, what's new, what do you have that's original? So I would just start with that.
Good, that's great. Now, Alla, you're in a different position now where your show's on once a week. So, but I think some of the things may be similar.
It's very similar because I'm going to kind of play off of all this and actually take one step back because everything you've heard is spot on. But the thing is, how prepared are you? Because it can take a long time. You can write a lot of great stories, you can send out things, you can tweet, and you just don't get noticed for a while. And you can't take it personally, but when the call comes through, are you prepared? Do you know how to be pithy? I mean, you can, and especially I think for print reporters, you have a lot of column space. You can explain things, you can get into the weeds. Sometimes people can reread that and go, okay, wait, I've got that now. When you're presenting on television, you have to be very clear without sounding like you're dumbing it down so that someone who's not necessarily just sitting and watching TV, because most of us are also on Twitter and cooking dinner and doing something else and whatever, we're multitasking. So you want someone to kind of go, wow, that was interesting what they said. Some fact, something that's not too into the weeds where someone's going, I have no idea what they're trying to tell me here. So you have to think of how do I say my point in 10, 15 seconds, and that takes preparation. And I agree with you, this is something where you can either do it on your own, with a friend, watch the 24/7, watch someone interviewing and saying, okay, so what will Senator Lautenberg's legacy be? Write down that question. How would you have answered it if that was your beat, if you cover the Senate? And record yourself. How did your voice sound? Did you do a lot of ums, well? Did you repeat yourself? Did it take you 3 minutes to get to it? Because we're in this world where you've got to make your answer, say, a minute less, and where you're giving enough information that the anchor, the host, is going to ask you a next question. So this is where being prepared, can you be succinct? Can you summarize your articles into something that's very conversational? You don't want it to be too rehearsed. Is your voice projecting well? Are you, one of the things I think when people who haven't done television is they tend to have some of these little tics that they don't even realize they have because they may not have them in regular conversation. I'll talk to somebody ahead of a segment, all of a sudden they go on and there's just this subliminal, oh my God, the cameras are on, and they get nervous. But the voice thing as well, that they sometimes will feel, okay, I know I have to say this and get to this and get to this. And before they're having a conversation with the anchor, they're just rushing. Oh, and then the other thing, the anchor you need to pause. You answer the question and then pause. And maybe the anchor or the host won't ask you the obvious next question. That's okay. You're prepared. You're going to answer whatever their question is. So it's being prepared, videotaping yourself, hearing your voice, hearing if you have any of those things. And also understanding that sometimes you may be sitting one-on-one, and that's one kind of conversation, and that's fine. But if you're going to be in a studio where you're looking into a black hole of a camera, it's not natural. We just don't do that. But it's very, if you train yourself and you say, okay, that's not a camera, that's my Aunt Ruth, and I'm just telling her this story, you come across as warm, you come across as conversational. So that's the being prepared side of it, in terms of you can be very good and know all of the details, but you're never going to have that much time on television. Very rarely. Even for our program, we're a half hour, no commercials. We still usually cover at least 4 topics, so we're kind of going pretty quickly, kind of skimming the cream off what you need to know. Here's the story, here's what's coming up next, here's what else you need to think about. So I'll kind of pause there.
Do you want to chime in here about your own experience with getting ready and some of the things you've heard?
Everything they said is true. You saw me giggling up here at everything that they said, because I have lived and continue to live everything that they're saying, including saying and ah a lot. But that's just it happens, and you shouldn't beat yourself up over it. But the presentation, being prepared, is incredibly important. And I'm glad the way you talked about being prepared. It's not just knowing your subject matter. It's how do you look? Do you know whether you're sitting one-on-one with an anchor? Are you on a panel? If you're one-on-one, you've got more time to talk. If you're on a panel, you might have 45 seconds. Are you in a studio with just a camera, and you're looking at the camera and you have to focus on the camera and speak, and it's weird because you're sort of walking on a tightrope with no net underneath? Is the program live or is it taped? For me, I can't stand taped shows, because I know if I mess up, I can do something. I'm sorry, could we please do that again? Whereas with live television, once the anchor asks the question, you have to answer. And I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked a question and I have no idea what I'm going to say. Sometimes even as I'm saying it, because there's so much information up here, and you can try to prepare. One of the things I tell people all the time is, and this is sort of a PR thing, 3 points. What are the 3 points you want to get across in the interview related to your story or the subject matter?
Exactly the same thing I had.
Yeah, but it's true. And so that way, if you've got this 1,600-word story, expose, and you can't get to all 1,600 words, what are the 3 key things you want readers and viewers to come away with? And that allows you to answer questions in the pithy manner, in the 15, I would love to have a minute to answer questions. I've done interviews, particularly with Andrea Mitchell's Next 24, where I am told we have a total of 1 minute from Andrea's introduction right through, and I'm asked the question and I start answering, well, Andrea, and then I hear in my ear, wrap, which means like, you're done, you've got like 10 seconds left. So, so everything that they said, that's been said here, is incredibly important. I was happy to see lots of people taking notes, because this is gold that you're getting.
Well, we've already sort of crossed over into the now you're on the air, what do you do? But Lucy, you were going to address that.
I'm going to move it forward a little bit, but the other thing I just want to mention here is, if you're lucky enough to know that you're going to be in a panel situation, do your research. Find out what the other guy or gal is going to say before you walk in. Know that you may need a repost. Know that they may have written an article that's totally 180 opposite of what you have said. Now, usually you know that reporters are coming from the same beat, but a good offense, good defense, get in there, make sure you know what this other person is going to say if you're lucky enough to have the time. That's my one other little, and gentle but firm. And
I was just going to add the same thing. Know the show that you're being invited to do. I mean, if it's going to be a show where it's very friendly and it's a back and forth, it's one thing. But if you're going to be on a panel where they want confrontation, they want kind of this side and that side and the third side of a story, if you're comfortable with that, go ahead and do it, but don't be surprised by it. And in being prepared, know your voice in terms of how you present things, because it's going to be there. So if you say something that perhaps you would say amongst your editors in your newsroom, but not necessarily broadcast to the country, there's a little bit different. You have to be mindful that people are listening to it and they may not hear it exactly as you may have intended it. So know the show you're being invited to do, that what the mood is. If the host is someone who tends to ask general questions and then you do have a little more time to answer, or if they ask something very specific. And if you're not prepared, I've seen this happen a lot of times. You're asked a question that's just completely off your grid. To figure out some way to not say, why are you asking me that? But instead to say, well, that's an interesting point, but let me tell you this as well, so that you're still providing, pivot, that's it. Pivot to continue to give some information. Now, the other, I'm gonna do this real quick, is if you're invited on and all of a sudden there's breaking news and it's something you really have not covered, let them know. Kind of anticipate, are we also gonna be talking about so-and-so resigning? So either you can study up on it and know enough to have a good conversation, or be able to say, I really have not been covering it. I've been in the immigration hearing all day. I have no idea what the Supreme Court decided today.
Honesty is always the best policy, and
Always.
you've got to be honest, because I've seen a few deer in the headlights, people that we booked that didn't make that pivot, and it's never attractive. Just to follow up on what you were saying, I think you want to honor your host, honor your anchor, let them guide you. They're the veterans. They want their show to be good, and they want you to be good. And even if you think he might be a horse's patootie, when you're in his house, you are going to respect him, and you may disagree, but I think there's a way to do it. Remember your manners. Remember what your folks taught you. Well, that all certainly goes tenfold when you're in a TV studio. And then there's how you look. Can we really get superficial here? Seriously, it is one of the biggest things I think we all talk about. They may be brilliant, but if the person who walks in does not look like they're ready to be on television, it damages their message, and it's not good for the show. And so I've got a couple tips, and I know we all do. This is one of our favorite topics. The camera likes simple. It doesn't like plaids. It doesn't like fancy. Plaid ties are okay.
Oh, okay.
That's right. On men. As long as it's a big plaid. Yeah. It doesn't like fussy. It doesn't like patterns. There's something called, or stripes. There's called moire. It sometimes even makes the camera, you've all seen this, makes the camera go funny. I'm going to speak to the women here first. A simple outfit, simple jewelry, simple earrings, nothing clangy. The last thing you want to do is you finally get your chance on the air and everybody's talking about how your earrings look as opposed to what you said. Goodness, that's not where you want to be in life. Jewel tone colors, perfect. Nice, simple jewel tone colors. A blouse and a jacket. Think Andrea Mitchell, think Leslie Stahl, think Gloria Borger. Did I cover everybody? And Judy Woodruff. I mean, they are absolutely, if you look at them, that's what you want to look like when you go on television. Men, you're not getting off the hook here. Wear a jacket and tie. Do not show up without a tie. If they want you to take the tie off, believe me, they're going to let you know. But in the meantime, respect, put on a tie, a lovely plaid perhaps like this one, not too stripy, subtle, blue shirt. I think most men, I'm of the opinion that most men look better on television in a blue shirt, blue Oxford, a blue button down, definitely shows you up. Hair clean, ready to go on television, ready to look. If you look your best, you've got one big thing covered already, as simple as that sounds. Also, be respectful. Do not get into a shouting match. Do not try to interrupt. Do not think that you're ever going to outshout each other. It does not work. It does not make you look good. Even if the guy is not letting you have a chance to speak, do not constantly go, up. It's up to the anchor, and the anchor will do their job. They're all professional. They will do their job, and they will get to you. Third tip from me, and then I'm going to pass the baton, is remember that the camera is always on you. Do not think, You never want to be caught in a cutaway looking down at your BlackBerry, as somebody I saw on our air was last week. I thought, why did we bring this person on our air? He's obviously much more interested in what's down here than looking at the camera. So you have to feel that it's always watching you. If you're not happy with the questions, if you're not happy, don't let it show. You've got to put on your best face forward and face the music and say what you have to say in a quiet but firm way.
Go ahead. I was
Just two
going
quick
to ask
things for
Amy a
women.
question.
If you're going to be on air, they need to put the mic on something, so it's often better to have a collar, a jacket, so they can pin the mic on something and hide the wires so that they're not seeing the wires on you. So that's, and also look good from head to toe. You don't know if you're going to be on a skirted, on a set where they don't see your feet, but if you have sandals on, and again, this is one of those, if you just keep an outfit in the office because you didn't expect it and it's just simple black slacks, you know, and regular dress shoes, you don't want it to be a shot where you're sitting at a set and the audience is now listening because they're going, are they really wearing Birkenstocks? You just, you know, you want to just walk in professional from the moment you arrive to the moment you leave.
Amy, you had something to say about the relations with the host.
With the host, yeah. Well, I actually wanted to go back to, you were talking about how important it is to know the show. It's also so important to know, I was thinking in terms of pitching, to know the host. And I think each host has his or her pet topics they like to talk about. So that's also so important to know. And just the style. The other thing that Barbara and I were talking about before this is don't be too chummy with the host, which I think a lot of guests, they might know the host outside of the show. They might, you know each other socially, and then they get on and they might be a little overly familiar. And that might be okay with some hosts, but I think that there has to be a certain, you're on television, it needs to be professional. It's not Regis and Kathy Lee. It's like you're not talking about the weekend. So I think there needs to be, some formality to that, so.
Okay. Jonathan, you.
Along the lines of knowing the show, one of the things, one of the criticisms I get on Twitter, on Facebook, to my face, behind my back, is that I, particularly on Morning Joe, I have people, when I'm on the show, yelling at me, why don't you jump in? If I were on that show, I would tell Joe off. I would do this and I would say that. And my response is always, well, when was the last time you've done television? Each show is different. Each show has its own choreography. And you have to understand that. I think, Lucy, you got to this in your opening remarks about not talking over people, being respectful, not just jumping in. Now, some shows want that, and they'll tell you, hey, feel free to jump in and say what you need to say. But, on a lot of these shows, in the early days of Morning Joe, you could talk over each other because it was a new show, everyone was getting to know each other. But as the show got older and the show found its feet and understood what kind of show it is and it wanted to be, suddenly no more talking over each other, because then it just became noise. No one could hear what the other person was saying. And so there have been times when I've been on the set and I've wanted to say something, and there's a monitor under the camera so I can tell when I'm on and when I'm not. And when you're not on camera, that's the time when you're like flailing at the camera saying, hey, I've got a point to make, or you're trying to signal to Mika or Joe, I've got a point to make, but the producer's in the ear saying, we got to go to break. We've got to go. These are the sorts of things that you wouldn't know unless you've done television. So, learn the choreography of the show. And back to something that Lucy was saying before about, doing your research on your fellow panelists. Yes, know what they've written, especially if they've talked smack about you in print or on Twitter. But the other thing is, learn their styles on television. There are certain people, when they tell me, oh, you're going to be on with this one, that one, and the other one, and I'm not naming names, but depending on the name, I can tell how much time I'm actually going to be able to have to speak. And depending on how busy my day is, that tells me how much time I really do need to prepare for a particular segment. But that's way down the line once you've had enough practice to know that. But it's helpful to watch as many channels as you can, as many people as you can, and if you have favorite people, favorite commentators, and maybe even people you don't particularly like, but you see them on all the time, watch them and try to figure out what is it about that person that I see him or her not only on MSNBC, but also on Fox and on CNN and on PBS and all these different shows.
Because we steal from each other.
Great.
I mean, before I was under contract with MSNBC, I would be at Nebraska doing Morning Joe, and then jump in a car and go all the way over to CNN and do, was it American Morning at CNN American Morning? Then the morning show at CNN then. Because that's what you do in order to get noticed, and that's something else on Lucy's cards, so I'll leave it.
Honestly.
So why don't we just let Lucy finish up with her? Because we've gotten to the point now, okay, we've been on, what happens after
Here's what happens.
that first time?
So you get off the air and you think, heavens, oh God, I finally got it done, and you walk off. And then you wait for the call that you hope that somebody's gonna call you back one day. Well, here's the number one thing. Sending a thank you email is important. Seriously, if you've finally gotten on TV and the booker's send her a thank you email. Geez, it was great to be on, and if you ever need me again, here's the rest of my number and my resume and whatever. If you start to get some traction, if you've been on 2 or 3 shows, and send it to the person who originally booked you, or along the way, say, here, I'm making progress. And if they keep calling you back to the same show, call the booker, call the EP if you've gotten to know them, and say, what am I doing right and what am I doing wrong? Because they'll be happy to tell you what you're doing right or wrong. Obviously, if they're asking you back, you must be doing something right. Now, what happens if the phone doesn't ring? Always a downer. But that doesn't mean you should stop in your pursuit. You keep going, you go back, you have a video of yourself, you take a look, you see the good things that you did, the bad things you did, and move it along. And I think that's it's if you start to hit it big, you'll know. You'll be like he was, bing, bang, boom, all over town to the different ones. Because people will definitely become flavors of the moment, depending on whatever the topic is. Obviously, if it's a scandal in the Senate, you're going to see a certain, pardon me, group of reporters. If it's terrorism, you'll see somebody else. Well, and then, one more thing, and then, so everybody then would like to become a contributor. That's my specialty. You get a lot of, they've been on a lot of television, they've been on 3 or 4 times, they think they're going to get hired as a contributor. How do you get to be a contributor? Practice, 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 the same way you get to Carnegie Hall. Do your absolutely very best. Every time you come on with your A game. If bookers start calling you, you go morning, night, noon, snowstorms, wife's having the baby, son's pitching Little League. I'm telling you, you go. You go as much as you can, because that's how you improve yourself. That's how you get known. And that's how it all works.
That's a perfect segue, because I'm going to tell you the other side of it, what Jonathan and Lucy both talked about. Everyone thinks, oh, you're going to come on, and it's all fun, and it's all glamorous, and it's all, no. You could show up at 5 in the morning, be ready for a 6 o'clock hit, and there's breaking news, and you never see the light of a camera. That's just the way that it works sometimes. Start out, we're talking, you've got, the A-team here, Maddow, CNN, Jonathan's on all the time. Start out C-SPAN, local programs. You want to start small because it's a little bit more nurturing environment. It's a little bit more usually of a give and take. There's not so much of this, you've got to do this in a minute and a half. You can watch yourself, you can get feedback, you can see what's going on. Do radio, Diane Rehm, where you're just learning how to be succinct and answer questions and things that are thrown at you. So you get that practice because you're going to make mistakes. You'll either brain freeze or something else happens, you want to do that in a small show. You don't want to do that on a big audience where you're kind of going, okay, I have no idea what the question was that you said. And that it can happen. It just does sometimes because you're thinking about too many things. So start figuring out what the local shows are or regional shows that might be in the area. You know, and be prepared that you may show up, and especially when you're starting out, you make sure if you have the booker's name, I'm available 4th of July, because they're always looking for people on holidays. They want people on early morning on the weekends or when long holiday weekends. That's when you get your chance, and you'll probably have a little bit more time in that segment because there's not a whole lot of other news happening. So it's a good chance. Yeah, it may not be ideal for your weekend, but it's a great learning experience. You get a little more time to talk with the producers, and you can really start building up your comfort level in doing these types of things.
No, I think that's such a good point. Never say no. Be a good sport. If we ask you to do the impossible, just don't say no. And just like I want to see your print clips, I want to see a clip of you on the air. So if it's on a web show or a local show, or maybe you're setting up your own video blog where it's just you talking about your story online, at least I want to see how you perform. It's so important. I mean, I try to judge on the phone when I'm talking to someone, but it's so much better to see that person on camera. And you brought this up before, set up a camera for yourself to practice all the time. Get media training if you can. But I think that it's just you have to keep doing it and send people your clips and examples of you on the air because it will help us judge what segment is right for you. So just and please don't spam. You brought that up before. Don't keep sending us emails. Don't keep calling us unless it's very targeted and you know that it's something that we do on the show.
And along with your appearance, your voice. For women especially, they can have kind of a little girl voice where there's no tone. You project from your vocal cords. People say from your diaphragm. You just have to have tone. You don't want it to sound affected, but you just want to have some tone and some evenness to it. Men and women, it can get nasal, and they don't realize it. And so it just, when a microphone picks it up, it sounds even worse. Go get someone to coach you or just practice kind of real. And a lot of it usually is just relaxing. It's just kind of pacing yourself and deliberately just, saying every point you're trying to make without either going into slow motion or just really sounding affected.
Great. I think it's time for questions. We've got a couple of microphones in the room, so if you raise your hand, the microphone will come to you. If you can identify yourself, that would be great. And so let's see. Why don't we start right here, the lady in orange.
Thank you, great panel. I'm a print reporter, and I really would like to have my career in print. So I'm interested in possibilities of radio and television, for one, disseminating my journalism, but also for proving my value to my employers. Increasingly, we're getting the signals that they want us to be on TV and on radio. How can you talk about how this improves our value to them? I mean, or looks good for future jobs in print down the road?
Jonathan, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Like I said before, people like to talk to people who are on TV. Bosses like to see not just you on television, but your organization on television. My editor has assured me that, he loves the fact that the Washington Post editorial board is there on television every day. It reminds people that we're there. We're an editorial board. We're an editorial page. A lot of people don't think of us. They think of just the paper as a whole. So that's what, doing television, doing radio, being multi-platform, because these days, those of us in print, we can't just be in print anymore. We have to be in our papers and magazines, on the web in a blog, and then on television, on radio, all over the place, not just to prove our value, but to help get our stories out.
And sell papers.
Right. Oh, yeah, there's that.
There's a business in the news business, you know.
Some people are lucky enough to work at organizations that actually help you do that. We don't have one of those represented here necessarily, but why don't you talk about how you work with some organizations that you might have a partnership with, or where you'll, Atlantic is one that was mentioned that comes to mind, where there's somebody there to help you, the reporter, get better at it.
And I think there's more like news organizations that'll have their PR person kind of handle it, but not necessarily do media training, but they're getting better about that. But
We do at the Post.
Yeah.
We have a PR department that does nothing but contact these folks about our reporters, stories in the papers, that also, I think we now do it once a year, where there is a 2-hour media training with folks at the paper who are interested in doing television, but also who the paper wants to push out there more.
because it's getting your personal brand, your byline out there, and it's getting your news organization's byline out there. And what Jonathan said is right. People think if you're on TV, you must be special. You must have something to say someone else doesn't. Buy it. I mean, that may not be true in every case, but it's going to help you because people are going to say, oh, I read your article. I remember seeing you. You were talking about it the other day on this show. So it builds your reporting coverage because people may just read a headline or read, a little bit of a story. They may not read the whole thing, but if they see you on television, they may click back to the website, and that's what your bosses want. They want clicks.
Okay, next question. Let's see, we've got someone in the back here, gentlemen.
Thank you. Wow, loud. Thomas Burr with the Salt Lake Tribune. Hey, I appreciate you doing this. Those of us don't have publicity departments. How do we find the views of this world? How do we find the bookers? How do we find the contact information and get through to the person we need to really be talking to at the different news outlets, broadcast outlets?
Okay.
At MSNBC, we actually have a desk that does all the daytime bookings. So you can just call MSNBC and say, I'd like the daytime booking department. Each show will have a staff of booking producers. So I would just do your own research and call the show and say, who's the best person for me to talk to? Is there a booking producer? But it's just a matter of finding the right person to talk to.
A lot of that stuff is there in Google as well. You Google, you look for the show, there'll be an article about 6 down that says, oh, here's the staff, because it's usually posted by somebody who's complaining about us, But all the names are there, so.
Any other advice? Maybe.
Send emails. Don't think you're going to get into these long conversations on the phone. Send an email, maybe follow up, but really you want to just put your information and here's what I wrote. I understand you're covering this and this. I'm available if you're looking for someone. I've done this and this and this. Especially once you've started doing other media, let them know that you've already kind of broken through and are comfortable, getting mic'd up.
But pin it, hook it
Yeah.
to a news event. I mean, absolutely. That's whatever it is. If you're writing about something that's that day, that's the time to send it. Because
Wait a second.
the question is, do we want attachments or, I'm sorry?
Depending on the attachment.
Depending
Your
yes.
story, a
What is
clip
your
to
story?
you on TV, of course, yeah.
But you're not looking for 5 clips or anything like that. You want it to be very topical,
Yes.
as I understand it.
We can always go back and ask for more, and frequently do.
Wait, and another thing, I think Lucy mentioned going to seminars, panels, meetings like this, networking, face-to-face networking. Take advantage of all those opportunities, which there are a ton of in Washington, because these folks, or the people who work for them, will be there looking for good people. And so if you're there too, you can, meet someone and exchange cards and get the direct email address. I have to say, it's not as easy to find your email addresses as you might think. Just from booking this panel, we found that out. Okay, next question. Let's go back here. Yes. Wait for the microphone.
Thank you. Hi, this is sort of a related question, but we're talking about skills from print to TV. What about making that job transition? Is that something that you see more and more print journalists being able to do? I mean, when I went to journalism school, it was a different track, so I wondered if you could comment on that related note.
Well, I think what Lucy said, if you're looking that all of a sudden you're going to become a contributor, that's a long path for most people. If you're looking to potentially go into local news, and because I've seen a couple of ABC producers who now are working, you know, in the local markets, that's possible. It goes back to storytelling and how you present. So it's possible. I mean, the big thing that any news director, print or TV, is how well do you tell a story? How well, and especially, I think the toughest part for print people is when you're working in TV, you got a minute 10 to tell that story. That's it. Minute 10, maybe less. And that includes your interviews, your sound bites, and can you be succinct and tell it well. When you're writing in print, you have the luxury of a little more space, some graphs, some really nice, you know. So it's not impossible, but you would still have to work on doing an interview is one thing. Packaging a story and telling it in a minute 10 takes a little bit different skill set, but they're very related. I don't think it's impossible.
Jonathan, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you ever thought of 100% television?
Well, truth be told, this whole print thing that I'm in is a bit of a fluke. Because ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a television reporter, or as I said at the time, news commentator. And when Bryant Gumbel was named the co-anchor of the Today Show with Jane Pauley, there was someone who looked like me who was doing a job that I wanted to do, which for me was mind-blowing because now this dream that I had, I saw that, oh, it could actually happen. So I'll fast forward. I got myself an internship on the Today Show. I worked on the Today Show 2 years after college. And then Mort Zuckerman bought the Daily News in New York and wanted young people who could write for the editorial page. Some phone calls were made. I got one, and I thought, sure, I'll go to the Daily News editorial page because that will help me in my quest for a television career, because through all my internships, I knew that people from television love people from print because they know how to think and they know how to write. And so I figured I'll go to the Daily News for a couple of years, and then I'll come back to the Today Show as an assistant producer. That'd be great. And I never went back. And I've been in newspapers now for more than 10 years, but coming to the Washington Post, which is a partnership with MSNBC, that got me on television, and that allowed me to be able to do both. That's the short answer.
I do think it's a different world today, and you're not in this little box that you can't move out of. I mean, I look at Rachel Maddow's experience, and she was a DJ in Northampton, Massachusetts. That's how she started. And she kept sending her tapes to Air America and got on the air, and then we all noticed her. But it's something that we had talked about, building on the storytelling idea. If you can, there are so many complicated stories today. If you can tell a really complicated story in a very human way, and I see this with Rachel, that is just worth so much to be able to communicate it to a wide audience of people who want to be educated. There's so many complex stories that we cover, and there are actually so few people that tell these stories really well. So I think that if you have this dream of, you know, you like print reporting, but you see yourself on TV, work on those storytelling skills on air.
Okay. Next question, this lady here.
I actually come from a background of being a lawyer, and I was a pundit back in the old days when if you could explain what the FBI standards were for finding something to be sperm under a microscope was really important. And I want to urge those of you who are booking guests to think about some of the issues that you are dealing with, many of which are legal, and you need to have more legal expertise. It's been driving me crazy that poor Eric Holder is being hung out to dry with nobody explaining, you know, what the prosecutorial discretion is that's going into deciding, of course, we're not going to prosecute reporters, but we want to get the judge to issue the warrant. So I'm here to just please do that. And I was brought into television by Greta Van Susteren, who just happened to be a local lawyer I tried cases against. And, you know, there was a period when all of my friends were on TV all the time. You need to get some of us back to educate on these issues.
Okay, any comments here? I think the focus today was how reporters can get on television. We could do another one next week at the Bar Association for how lawyers can get on television. I think many of the same rules would probably apply. Let's take a question from this side. Let's see, there's someone there.
Hi, my name is Mary Liz Burns. I work for AARP. I was sort of thinking through about the hyper-partisan nature of many of the programs that you all work with. For us that have a lot of subject matter experts, we try to encourage them to be as succinct as possible. Yet, for those who might be a little nervous about going on different platforms, even if you're from a media outlet that might be nervous about one side or the other, what is some advice that you've given to those to be most relevant to the programs you have, who may be a little nervous about the politics of it?
Yeah, that's definitely, I know that's a concern, because
Amy?
Yeah, no, I can also relate that to reporters as well, because reporters, obviously, they want to be seen in a certain light, that they're not partial to the story, and I feel proud that on our show yes, we are certainly like the editorial page and that we have a point of view, but I think more than anything, we're interested in the information, and that's most important. But I just want to make sure I understand your question correctly. So coming from AARP, how do you give someone, an expert from AARP, a comfort level in appearing on a show that might have a certain political bent?
We prepare our folks with knowing what the show is, the format, the host, yet trying to get even more people to be more succinct with the information and also give the value, so that they may not be going on saying they're one particular position or another, yet they want to be called back for the information they're providing, or the kinds of things that organizations can do to pitch you all in the appropriate way.
Right.
So.
Well, and you know, it always depends on the show and what the show is looking for, and I think it's the same rules apply of how do you advance the story, and obviously you might be coming from a certain agenda or a certain point of view that you want to get across, that you need to, I guess, sell us on how it fits into how we're covering the story, regardless of what the point of view of the show is. It's just kind of selling us on, okay, this is what everyone's talking about on the Hill. These are the concerns. Why should our audience care about what your organization is trying to get across? And is that, I don't know, it really, I don't know, it depends on the show and the story and what we're talking about. And sometimes, even though, yeah, we have a point of view, we're looking for something else beyond the agenda. We're talking about, I don't know, something else. So I think it depends.
Okay, let's see, a question here, this gentleman here.
What about any role for middlemen? There's been no talk at all of, you know, I asked a reporter once at the White House, how do you get on television? One thing she said, well, get a good agent. And, you know, if you have an agent that's going to pitch you, knows all the people, this doesn't happen anymore, eh? Is that because of the social media or whatever?
I don't think that's the case, sir. I beg to differ with you. I think...
Well, that's what she told me. That was 20 years ago.
Well, things have changed a little bit. I don't believe that's true. I think that it is an agent pitching you, it usually works the other way around. In other words, if somebody is going on a lot of shows and is in a high demand, they find themselves an agent, I think you all would agree with me on that. And so the agent isn't going to pitch an unknown. It'd be very rare that that would happen. Certainly not an unknown that anybody at this table would buy.
Having an agent would mean that you're already at that contributor level, and so you'll be getting paid, and we don't pay reporters who are not contributors. So we're really not dealing with agents unless they're at that point of being a contributor or being someone who's on the level of a host or talent. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. Let's try this lady here.
Thank you. I am on WTOP and actually have a radio show myself. So I have 2 quick tips and 2 quick questions. One is, have way more to say than is in your blog or your article. If you've got an article that's getting somebody's attention, know that you need to be able to expand on it. I mean, people come on and they're prepared for the 3 points in their blog, and then you ask them something that's an expansion of it, and they get deer in the headlights, and it kind of doesn't work for you. Doesn't make a great impression. The other is, nothing's ever lost on the internet, so Google yourself, because they will, or we will, and know what they're going to find out and be prepared for what that is, good and bad. My 2 questions are, if I could, there have been times when I've been a guest and I've asked who the panelists were and they refused to tell me, which I thought was kind of odd. It kind of prohibits you being prepared. So I'd like you to react to that. And the other is, I've gotten questions that are completely from left field. And again, pivot and say, this is, make the point you want to make. But is there a way to find out, any other suggestions on what to do when you get that, or is there a way to find out, people who do that a lot? I mean, I watch different people, but of course, we all have day jobs, and we can't just spend our lives watching other commentators and other interviewers all the time. So how do you know when you're going to be interviewed by somebody who's, kind of off the wall?
Okay. So if they don't tell you who the panelists are, I mean, you just have to be prepared. I mean, you're being invited on because you know a certain something that the show, the anchor, wants to hear from you, wants to learn from you. And then if you find out that the other two panelists or the other panelist is either a nemesis, arch enemy, someone with whom you do not get along, or could be your best friend or someone you're familiar with, well then by the time you get to the studio, if you're in the green room or you see it, you'll know who it is. And then that little time that you have between makeup and sitting in the chair is your time to sort of mentally prepare for what's about to happen, if something bad has happened. Have you ever had that
experience?
Where
you went in not knowing who you were going to be on with?
I can't even remember the last time I wasn't told. It's a little funky.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the other
But then call, right an hour before you're going to be on. Well, no, they just didn't have someone booked yet. And who was it that was on with you?
We'll have that conversation later.
No, I'm not saying the person, but were you, anyway.
And then in terms of the left field question, I mean, I've gotten those many, many times. And there are times when I have not a clue. I'm just, what the hell is this? Where is this coming from? But you have to, and this is why I love live television, because you never know what the left field question is going to be, but you have to answer. So you've got to figure out a way to, I think one time I was asked this left field question, and I just sort of looked quizzically and laughed, like, wow, that's really interesting. What do you want me to say to that? If it's germane to what you're talking about, you will figure out a way. It's just the fear of being on live television and being like having everyone watch you fall flat on your face is enough to help you pivot when you need to pivot.
It propels you forward.
Yes, it does.
I don't think you can really ever expect what's going to happen. I mean, it's live. You just have to roll with the punches. It's almost sometimes like improv because it's news. We never know what's going to happen. And, there could be breaking news as the show is unfolding. And so it's an art where you have to roll with it and just think on your feet. And that's where the practice comes in. I think you get better with that with time.
I think back to the earlier discussion about know the host. One thing you don't want to do is tell the host that he or she is a jerk for asking that question, or suggesting that by the way you answer the question. I've seen that done, and it's not pretty.
It's a surefire way to not be invited back.
Yes. Yes. Okay. We had a question on this side. Let's, a lady in the front row here. We'll take two more questions because we're over our time and we didn't rent the room for that long.
Hi, I'm Joyce Frieden from MedPage Today. You talked about picking the person to write to or to approach. Everybody likes to feel special and know their niche. But if all your shows cover a big variety of topics. So if I'm talking about health policy, it might be a topic that interests you and also interests Rachel and could be on Week in Review. Do you guys have any hints, or can you tell us your specific things?
What I meant is don't send, sometimes, and I know we've all had this, we get emails where there's 6 different networks mentioned. So that's what I'm saying. Don't send a mass email to all of us saying, here, I've written this wonderful article on healthcare and so on. Do it individually. That's what I meant. I'm sorry if I was not clear.
You're okay with doing one at a time on the same article, is what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Because we don't want to think, they're going to show up on CNN, so maybe I'll wait till I see them on CNN.
Right.
But if you send it to each of it, I know that sounds kind of silly,
yeah,
but we're kind of silly sometimes that way.
And
Okay.
also,
Go ahead.
Again, it goes back to just watching the show and watching what we're covering. And I think what I meant by spam is I don't want to get an email from a reporter every day when it's not relevant to what we're covering that day. So just think about if there is something on the Hill that's happening that's really relevant that everyone's talking about, send it to us on that day when it's really pressing.
And you know yourself, each of you who are reporters know where you fit. Probably even have some favorite shows amongst all of ours. Direct yourself towards where you think you can A, get on, and B, make a difference in what you have to say.
Okay, I think we're going to cut it off here, and I'm going to go back to our panelists for one final question. I'm going to start again with Jonathan, and just one pithy piece of advice that we might not have covered up to now.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have one.
Oh.
But here's the thing. So let's say you're now in the mix. You're on television maybe once or twice a week. You're getting the practice that you need. The phone calls are coming in, and it's wonderful. The best piece of advice, it's not even advice, it was just a statement made by a former high-ranking television producer who had come from the print world. His comment to me was, Jonathan, TV makes people crazy. And when he said it, I've always known this, but to hear it just sort of enunciated made a whole lot of sense. When those phone calls come in, it's great. When you hear from Lucy, you hear from Amy, and you hear from everybody, and they want you to come on, and you're riding high. And then maybe one week, the phone doesn't ring. Or the next week, the phone doesn't ring. The thing to keep in mind is that television is cyclical. depending on what's in the news, depending on the way the shows go. Remember, shows aren't static things. They are, I call them living organisms. The way a show is the day it debuts is completely different from the way it is a month later, a year later, 5 years later. Keep in mind that none of this is personal. It's just the way that the way the business is, the way the shows are. Let's say the shows keep calling, and you then become a contributor. In terms of like knowing your proving your value, find a show that's your home, which then guarantees that you are on television, which means that other shows will see you on. They'll say, oh, this is my 4th time seeing this person this week or this month. Let me hear what they have to say. Oh, he or she is great. Let me put this person on my air. The last 2 things, patience and persistence. If this is what you want to do, you've got to stick with it. Eventually, it will happen. The people who flame out are the people who lose patience. And it's very tough to figure out where that line is, but you have to have it. And then the last thing is to always remember that what folks see on television is the glamorous part of television from their perspective. But I can tell you, as someone who has had to get up at 3:30 in the morning to be on television at 5:30 in the morning, and then go through all day doing all other shows and ending at 10 o'clock at night, on top of my real day job, which is writing for the Washington Post. When you are bone tired and you can barely think straight, that's when you realize that it's not all glamorous, but it's exactly what you want to be doing. You would rather be bone tired than not doing that. So that's what I will leave you with.
Thank you. Lucy.
He makes it sound like it's dating or being in a sorority. All the sororities are rushing, the fraternities are rushing it. In a way, it kind of is. But I think the most important thing you do is if you start to get on television, keep a file of it. Keep your best, just like you always update your resume. Always update that file. Keep it accurate. Put your best performances on. Weed out the bad stuff, so that when you are called, you've got the best thing you can possibly have to send it forward. The other thing I forgot to mention, and it's a small thing, but it's a big thing. Remember that when you go into a television studio, the people that are putting on your makeup and the technical people, they are all there to make you better. They are wonderful people. They work very hard. Listen to what they have to say, because everybody has to pass through their hands. So always give them, And to just follow up on something else you said, TV is dots in the air. It forms, it reforms. Sometimes it looks like you, sometimes it looks like somebody else. Don't ever take it too seriously. Do not go, if you are lucky enough to make it to the top of the heap, do not take it or yourself too seriously. It's a wonderful thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to have happen to you. But there's life beyond it as well.
Right off of that, just be a professional from the time you get the phone call to the time you leave the studio. And maybe you had a bad morning and you had a parking ticket or something else happened and you got there and then they had to cancel your segment. Oh, well, this is how it happens. No one wanted to inconvenience you. So if you're professional and you're pleasant, they go, boy, they handled that well. We'll have to remember to get them back. And also professional in your tweets and any social media. Yeah, I see now, and for us, because we're a little bit more kind of less partisan and much more kind of just straight news analysis, some people start tweeting and they're doing kind of snarky remarks and they're doing comments about the most bizarre things about their personal life, which are sometimes really funny, but have nothing to do with kind of their brand or their image. People look at this, they look it up and they're wondering, what is this person, are they going to come on and give me a good report about health care or immigration or something else, or are they going to kind of give me a little bit something I didn't ask for. Now, you may want to, you know, depending on the show, they may want a little bit more of one thing or the other, but everything you put out there, someone can Google you and someone can search it. So be very mindful of that, the way you present yourself, and just, again, you just want to be, and what Lucy said too, from the makeup to the crew to the people that mic you, these people want you to do well. Even the, you know, the people that may ask you a question on left field, they're not really doing it to ambush you. Their mind is going in 25 ways, or the producer might be in their ear going, don't forget to ask him about, you know. So they're not trying to put you on the spot. There's a lot of things going on that you don't see happening. So good luck to all of you.
When I think about it, I think what's most important, what we're looking for, is an original voice. So develop your own original voice. Know yourself, know your reporting. Something we didn't talk about, which is a sense of humor. The people that I often turn to, we're talking about such serious issues all the time. It's nice to talk to someone who can see the light in certain topics, because it is television and it should be fun. So have fun with what you're doing. And I think that there are so many creative options out there with social media and digital media. So try to use that to your benefit in selling yourself to producers.
Thank you, all of you. This has been fabulous. We ran way over our time. Let's applaud our